everyone, and thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar. Today is all about our psychology program, and before we get too deep into that and too excited about everything that Lakehead has to offer and some amazing information on our psychology program, I want to just do some quick housekeeping items. So everyone, all of our participants in this webinar, except for our hosts and co-hosts, have been muted for the presentation portion of the webinar today. There is a feature called our question and answer feature, and this will be worked into the presentation. So we do encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A feature, which is located on the bottom of the navigational bar. Alternately, you can use the chat feature, but the Q&A feature does work best, as we can either answer those questions directly in the Q&A format, or we can post those questions and answer them live as part of the webinar today. And this is a great way to have your specific questions answered in relation to the psychology program. And we have some amazing guests on tap with us today, and they're really excited about sharing some information with you. Just before we get started, I do want to mention the information we are providing today, program-wise, is related to all students. But when we talk a little bit about the admission process, we are focusing primarily on students that are direct from high school and coming from the Canadian educational system. If you are looking for information on grad studies, this is an undergrad-based program we're talking about today. And if you are an international student, there are other resources that we can provide you to assist and support you with finding the information that you're needing. Also, just so you're aware, we are all still working from home, and as a result, there may be some unavoidable or unexpected noises in the background. We do apologize for this, but we are excited to welcome you to our webinar today and share kind of all the information we have to offer. Lastly, before we get started, I do want to let you know this webinar is being recorded, so we can have this available to individuals that are not able to attend the webinar today. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick introduction of myself, and then I will get the other attendees to introduce themselves as well. So my name is Tori. I work in undergraduate recruitment at Lakehead University. I'm a recruitment advisor, and I'm here to support and advise students on everything Lakehead related and making amazing choices for choosing Lakehead for that next great adventure. I'm going to get my colleague Jess to introduce herself now.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica and I'm a recruitment advisor from Lakehead University as well. I'm very excited to be here with all of you chatting about psychology. I'm really hopeful that I can answer some of your questions. And I'm also a recent graduate, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about student life.
Awesome, and now I'm going to turn it over to our guests from the Faculty of Psychology to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Morella Stroink. I'm a professor of social psychology, cultural psychology, and community psychology at Lakehead University. And I'm also the chair of the department. So I'm involved in helping students navigate their programs and providing advising along with our program coordinator. I'm happy to assist students all along the way. And I can also introduce Jaden, one of our students.
Hello, I'm Jaden Charlton. I'm in my 4th year for the specialized HBA in psychology, and I also look forward to talking about student life and answering any questions that may pop up.
Thanks, Jaden. And we're very lucky in the Department of Psychology not only to have great students like Jaden, but we also have a program coordinator, Jennifer. And Jen, her role is a unique one in our department or in the university, and she provides advising and support to students all along the way. So lots of emails and information and resources to help you navigate your program. Jen, are you able to pop on and say hello? There she is.
Don't be shy.
Sorry, I was having some technical issues. Hi, I'm Jen, program coordinator. Students in our program get a lot of information from me, and I'm here to support our students all through their program and into their master's programs as well.
Fantastic. So you can see we have an incredible team on this webinar today from faculty and advisor and student end. So this really is a great opportunity for you to post a ton of questions for us and really engage us on what things you're wondering about. We are going to do some general information. So before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to Jess to talk a little bit about Lakehead before we delve even further into the psychology program.
Awesome. Thanks, Tori. So yes, I just want to give you guys some quick facts about Lakehead before we get into the program-specific content. So just so you know, we are one of Canada's top 10 primarily undergraduate universities, and that ranking actually comes from Maclean's magazine. We have a total population of 8,500 students, and that's across both of our campuses. We're rated as being the #1 undergraduate research university, and you'll hear about some of those research opportunities in a few minutes. And 90% of our classes have fewer than 60 students. So I can tell you as an alumni, that was hugely significant for me throughout my undergraduate experience. And a lot of our students really value the one-to-one connections with faculty. The other thing that I just really want to make note of is that our graduates are 96.7% employed within 2 years of graduation. And that just really speaks to the caliber of education that Lakehead provides and all of the hands-on learning opportunities that provide students with the technical skills that they need to succeed in the workforce. And with that, I will hand it over to our amazing psychology team.
Hi, everyone. So a big question we often start with when we do events for potential students is, what is psychology anyway? Some of you may have taken or are currently taking a course called Psychology, Sociology, and Anthropology. I think it has a different title now. That gives you a good foundation and an understanding of what psychology is as a discipline. It's one of many tools that we can bring to inquiring about and trying to understand human behavior. So psychologists are really fundamentally interested in why people do the things they do, think the way they think, feel the way they think, and why we behave the way we do in groups and how we change over time as we develop. If you're curious about people and want to use a scientific method to try to understand the inner processes that lead people to think and feel and act the way they do, then psychology is for you. There's a lot of different subfields within psychology, and that's why it's such a rich and full discipline. You have many things to learn. So there's lots of different subfields ranging from biologically focused psychology, where we try to understand human behavior and experience by looking at the brain and the nervous system. For example, how does the brain integrate sensory information? How does the brain operate under different conditions? What are the effects of different types of drugs or medication or environmental toxicants on the brain? But we also talk about cognitive psychology, which is another foundational area in the discipline, and that helps you to understand how the mind works. So how does language develop? How does language even work? How does attention work? How is it, if you're a teacher or a parent and you're trying to understand how to help your child pay attention, what does that even mean? What is pay attention? What is the brain or the mind doing when we pay attention? Same with problem solving. What are the mechanics of the mind as it works through questions or problems? And then there's social psychology, where we understand social behavior, team dynamics, leadership, relationships, helping and pro-social behavior, aggression, intergroup conflict or warfare. Why does that happen from a psychological perspective? How do we identify with our groups and then come into conflict with each other? Developmental psychology I've mentioned already, because it actually runs through all the other subfields. With any of the other questions, how does it change over time? So how do our understandings of relationships change from adolescence to old age? That's a developmental social type of question. Or how does language change from infancy or before, actually, all the way through life? Developmental psychology looks at changes. And then finally, individual psychology is concerned with how people differ from one another. So can we look at personality traits or characteristics that people have formed, temperaments that lead some people to act some ways and other people to act other ways? And through all of that in psychology, we use scientific methods. So you'd be learning a very objective, critical, scientific way of thinking about and trying to understand human behavior. That is the foundation you get in undergraduate studies, really understanding to its depth how and why people work the way they do. And then we turn that, especially in graduate education, but also in third and fourth year, you start to be exposed to the different ways that we use that foundational knowledge to do things. So obviously, many of you have heard of clinical psychology, being a psychologist or a psychotherapist, either assessing or diagnosing people with mental illness, or working in a therapeutic environment with people undergoing stress. That is a major application of psychology, one of the big things we do with it. You start learning some of that in your third year, and fourth year we have some psychotherapy courses. And then in graduate school, we offer grad programs in clinical psychology here as well. But there's many other directions that psychology goes in, from clinical psychology, but also things like educational psychology, and the research methods you learn in psychology. That scientific method is also really valuable in many disciplines or many fields. There's also, I was going to mention, business applications. If you're interested in organizational psychology or sales, psychology is relevant to that too, but I'm starting to get ahead of myself. So fundamentally, that is what psychology is. Everything I've just said there, foundations of the discipline. Thanks. Okay, so then the next big question I often get from students in high school is, should I do the HBA or the HBSC, or what does my program look like? Well, it depends on whether you do the Honors Bachelor of Arts or the Honors Bachelor of Science. So essentially, the psychology part of those two degree programs is the same. So whether you're doing an arts or a science degree, the psychology part is exactly the same. What differs are the electives that you do alongside. So when you're taking intro psych in your first year, that's the only psychology course in your first year, is Introduction to Psychology. It's one of the 5 full course equivalents that you do. The other 4 are your other program, your other degree requirements. So if you're in the arts, it would be humanities and social sciences courses like English, history, sociology, political science, and so on. If you're in the sciences, it would be biology, chemistry, math, or computer science alongside your psychology. Which of those should you do? I always say it depends on which one you will do best in. Look at your own strengths. Where do you shine right now in your courses? Do you enjoy math and science courses? Do they work well with you? Then take the HBSC. If you enjoy English and history and social sciences, then take the HBA. In terms of career trajectories, it really does not matter whether you do the HBA or the HBSC, with only a couple of minor exceptions. For the most part, all career pathways are open whether you do the HBA or the HBSC. Even medical school, you don't have to have done an HBSC in psychology to be a successful applicant to medical school. What you need are high marks. So you can get that. If you can do that best through an HBA, take an HBA. You can always take the occasional science course as an elective along the way in your HBA, but doing an HBSC and working your way through the math and other requirements when that's not your strength would not help you in your long term if you're trying to get into something like medical school. Clinical psychology, same. You can do either HBA or HBSC. It really doesn't matter. What matters more are your marks and how well you've kind of integrated into the program and succeeded in getting involved. I'm going to pass it over to Jaden for a second just to see which degree she did and if she has any thoughts on the difference between them.
I did the Honors Bachelor of Arts because I personally was very much drawn to history and English and stuff like that at the same time. I found when I was figuring out which one to do, because it's not to say personally that I'm bad at math or science, but for me, I wanted to have a little more variety in some of the electives, because I found in the first year, there was more mandatory courses for the science degree, and they were more science related. But me personally, I wanted to get more anthropology, history, sociology type courses. So that's why I picked the Honors Bachelor of Arts. If you're the opposite of that and your strength is in the sciences, well, then you can go with the science degree. But that was my experience with that one. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jaden. That's a really good point, actually, that I didn't mention, that in the HBSC program, there are fewer elective options because there's more specification, like if you need to take a certain number of science courses, so there's less flexibility. Whereas in the arts degree, other than a few requirements to take certain humanities or social sciences, otherwise it's just electives. So if you choose to take science courses within your HBA, you can, as long as you have the prerequisites. So you do have more flexibility in the HBA, that's for sure. Thanks, Jaden.
So I just have a quick question for you before you jump on. That was fantastic, and thank you for explaining kind of the difference between the honors degree and the arts degree and the science degree. You did mention that the majority of the time it would make no difference, depending on what career path a student chooses to go into, to take either a science or an arts. But you did mention occasionally it does have an impact. Can you give us a few examples on when it may be more specific that a student would choose a science or an arts degree for psychology?
Absolutely. So a couple of exceptions I can think of is if a student was exceptionally interested in neuroscience. Like the picture shown here is actually a researcher affixing an electroencephalogram device to measure the electrical waves from the mind or from the brain. If you're interested in neuroscience and going further into how the brain actually works, in that case, then you'd probably be served well by taking the HBSC and digging deep in those first couple of years into the biology of human anatomy. So going deeper into some of those real foundations of how cells work and that sort of thing that you would get maybe from biology or chemistry courses in organic chemistry, to understand on a really basic level how the processes inside the brain are working. Neuroscience on that level is a graduate level program, so you can do your undergraduate degree here, do a great HBSC, majoring in psychology, taking all of those biology and chemistry courses, and then apply on in graduate programs, and you'd be very well served there. So that's one example. Another I can think of is for medical school, for example, you don't need to have an HBSC. You can do it with an HBA, but there are certain courses that they often look for, specifically anatomy type courses when you apply to medical school. So you could do it with an HBA and take courses like anatomy as electives, but sometimes students want to do that from the sciences side. Jennifer, is there anything else that I should mention in terms of HBA and HBSC that you can think of?
The only thing that I can think of, and I'm not sure if I just missed it, but the psychology courses are the same for both programs. So the psych courses that you're taking are not going to be any different, and your education in psychology will be the same regardless of which degree, choice, or stream that you take.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think that's the key take-home message there. Research opportunities. Okay, so psychology as a major you can take anywhere. And for the most part, undergraduate programs in psychology are similar at all the universities you might be considering. So why Lakehead? Well, what I like to talk about when I think about why Lakehead psychology specifically is that we are just the right size. So Lakehead, as you've heard, is a comprehensive university, but yet our class sizes are still relatively small. In your third and fourth year courses in psychology, it's not uncommon to be with no more than 20 students in a class. The under second year courses, some of them are up to about 100, but there's others that are more like 60 or 50 students in them. So you get a chance to get to know the professors that are teaching the different core areas in psychology, and that helps you to get involved. So what do I mean by get involved? Well, right from first year, you have a chance to get involved in research as a participant first, participating in research studies, and that gives you an exposure to a range of different types of research that's going on in the department. And then from there, as you get to meet different professors, or you read about them on our website, or you hear about information that comes from Jennifer through the department, you learn, okay, well, this person is doing this kind of research, and I'm really interested in that. You can easily approach those professors because you've met them before, and you can say, hey, I'm interested in your work on such and such. Would I be able to volunteer in your research lab or take a course? And we feature this course, Psychology 2917, which is basically a research opportunity course. You get course credit for working on a research project with a professor who's your supervisor. And so through that, students get the chance to learn how to create surveys, learn how to search the literature and find measures of different psychological constructs, work in the lab collecting data from participants. I know Jayden has done that, and I'll get her to speak to that in a moment too. Or actually like working in the lab with, some of the neuroscience researchers actually have participants getting physically involved hands-on with doing some of the tasks in the lab. And so that gives you hands-on experience. And you can start doing that right from your second year through the research opportunity course or as a volunteer if you don't want to spend quite as much time in it. And then through that, it's not too difficult to get an opportunity to do an honors thesis in your fourth year, where you can learn hands-on about how to run a project, how to build a project, how to analyze data and examine or inquire into topics of your interest. So it's easy at Lakehead. We're small enough that you can get to know your professors, you can get involved in these research studies, but also we're large enough that we have a graduate program, for example. So you can see what that's like. The teaching assistants you have are graduate students doing master's or PhD degrees in clinical or research psychology. So you can talk to them, find out how they got where they are, and you can see what that whole spectrum of psychology study is like. Jayden, did you want to speak to what you did in your research opportunity courses?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have quite a few research experiences in my time here. Firstly, in my second year, I did that research course that you mentioned in your lab, to be exact. That was my first hands-on experience in a laboratory, and I have to say it was a very cool feeling being the one putting participants through the study versus being a participant, which is another big opportunity you get at Lakehead because they give out bonus points to participate in studies. So you can really get the perspective from both sides. And then in my third year, I participated as a research assistant in another lab, Dr. Mushquash's lab. And both Dr. Stroink's and Dr. Mushquash's lab have given me valuable insight into how these studies work and how they're compiled and how to run participants. They've taught me the importance of protocol and ethics and professionality and all that jazz, if you will. And as a result, since I'm in my fourth year in the specialized honors, I'm doing an honors thesis as well. And having that background into how studies are conducted and constructed, I'm very prepared and feeling very good about my honors thesis and the work that will be required of me in the future for graduate degrees or even beyond that in career settings. So it's very, very valuable and fun experiences to have as well. So that's my personal experience, and advice out of that would be take these opportunities and see where they can take you. So
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jayden. Yeah, that you summarized that very, very well. Thanks. Careers. So building on what Jayden was saying, it's as you get involved in researchers working with different professors on their projects, and then ultimately getting a chance to run your own project as an honors thesis, perhaps, if that's the choice you make, you can start to see how you are building yourself toward a career trajectory. As Jayden was mentioning, she's thinking about different graduate programs and beyond that as well. So what are some careers? What can you do with a psychology degree? So that's a huge question, and it all depends on what you do with it. So if you are planning on doing, you just want to do the 4 years and get your bachelor's degree of arts or science in psychology, what can you do with just that? So let's start there. Well, what you're learning in a psychology undergraduate degree is a scientific way of thinking, an objective and critical way of thinking about people. And at the same time, you're gaining foundational knowledge in all of the different aspects of what makes people think and act and behave the way that they do. So imagine how useful that is going forward in a number of different types of career. Clearly, anything in social services where you are working with people in any number of settings. So working with people with disabilities, working with seniors, working with children, our people with disabilities to understand, how is it that they're operating? How can I use different techniques to help them change their behavior? How can I set up an environment so that they feel comfortable here and the behavior becomes what we would like it to be? So even just understanding that in the context of social services, lots of career pathways there. And coming out of a bachelor's degree in psychology with decent marks, going into social services, you could end up in a supervision role, like you're supervising staff. You might be creating programs. So you might be the one deciding or developing, what does this sort of prevention program look like? How could this work? How might I communicate, or promote a program run by, let's say, the district health unit on hand washing? How might we do that? Because you have an understanding of how people read information and how they see things. So social services, healthcare, in any number of different settings for healthcare, there's, you might be finding yourself in a role as a medical receptionist or working toward that, or working in public health, or any number of kind of healthcare settings. I know some people have gone on to become pharmacy assistants just from an undergraduate degree in psychology. So there's a number of pathways in healthcare. Education is another very common one. We do offer concurrent education programs where you do some of the education requirements while you're doing your psychology program, and then you do an extra 2 years after in order to get the credentials to become a teacher. There's many students who pursue that, and then you might be ready to become a guidance counselor, for example, once you continue on, because you have that good foundation. So many careers, and also business, sales and marketing, human resource management, anything where you're working with people, you have a good foundation of knowledge. Also, something that people sometimes forget is that if you take psychology, you learn about research methods and statistics. And Jaden mentioned that a little bit there. You're learning how to design a research study that is careful and controlled and systematic, which allows you to see, okay, which of these treatments works and which ones don't, and why, and very carefully to understand that and to use mathematics, statistics, and we're very gentle in how we teach that, to understand whether a difference is meaningful or significant or not between a treatment group and a placebo or a control. So with that research method, you are also well equipped to go on and do a career working with government in StatsCan, for example. We've had some go on there. Also in interesting things like CSIS, the spy agency for Canada, understanding human behavior and the research methods, even at the undergraduate level, is super valuable. But then, of course, there's many different pathways going on from there with postgraduate education. There's postgraduate diplomas from the college that you can combine with your bachelor's degree in psychology within 1 year to be ready for a profession like human resource management or addictions and mental health work, and so on. And then there are master's programs in a range of disciplines from psychotherapy to clinical psychology. Social work is another pathway students sometimes go through from a psychology degree into social work, and beyond. Research type degrees, international relations, many options. Social justice is one. Okay, so there's lots of different career pathways. People often only think about being a clinical psychologist or a psychotherapist, but you can see there are many options, and they don't all have to involve going on into graduate programs. Jen, was there anything I missed from our career discussions?
No, you captured it all.
Okay.
And I might just jump in here. There was a question in the Q&A. Someone's wondering what we would need to take at Lakehead in order to go into the field of forensic psychology.
Forensic psychology. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very popular choice. So forensic psychology is basically anything involving the intersection of psychology and the law. So that includes using the psychological perspective to understand criminal behavior or victim recovery, but also things like the workings of the court, jury selection, and things like deciding which parent or whether a parent should have access to kids or not often involves forensic psychologists. So it's a complex and wide field of its own. I know sometimes people are thinking of forensic psychology from what they see on TV, which is definitely part of it, usually crime scene analysis and stuff like that. But it's that and many other things too. So how do you get to a career in forensic psychology? Yes, begin with a major in psychology, either arts or science degree, doesn't matter. And major in psychology, maybe take a minor in criminology, which we offer at Lakehead. So major in psychology, minor in criminology would be a great foundation. Do well. We actually have one of the country's best researchers in forensic psychology here at Lakehead, Dr. Beth Visser, and she studies psychopathy, or the dark triad, personality traits that make people do or more likely to engage in criminal behavior. So she could be somebody you work with in a research opportunity course or an honors thesis, which would launch you very nicely into a master's program. And there's different ways that master's program can look depending on exactly what your interests are. If you want to be a clinical psychologist who does forensic work, then you'd want to go into a master's in clinical psychology at a university where there's a strong forensic element. Or if you're interested more in the research, you want to work with the police and analyzing people, then you could go into a master's of arts or science in like experimental psychology, again, working with somebody who does research in forensic psychology. How would you major in psychology and minor in criminology? Because I looked into which school they're taught and they're at different school. I think you mean two different campuses. So criminology is housed at the Aurelia campus, but and psychology is housed at the Thunder Bay campus. So how do you do that? Well, criminology offers a lot of their programs online, a lot of their courses online. So for a minor, you could certainly piece together the courses required for a minor while you're doing the psychology program located in Thunder Bay.
That's a great question. And that I just want you to build on that a little bit more for us as well. So you did talk about, when we talked about the Honors Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and the Honors Bachelor of Science in Psychology, you also touched on our concurrent education program. But can you also talk a little bit about that opportunity to expand your learning with double majors available within the psychology program as well? So you've talked about the minor in criminology, and that is a great offering for students that are wanting to do the psychology degree and pick up that minor in criminology. You can do that from the Thunder Bay campus. But let's touch on a little bit on the double majors also available within the program.
Yes, we have a number of combined programs. In addition to the ones in education, we also have two different combined programs with gender and women's studies. There's an HBA in psychology with is that a combined, Jennifer? Is that a combined major with women's studies? Yeah, I think you're still muted.
Sorry, I am. It is a double major, and so you would major in both women or gender studies and psychology.
Okay, good.
We also offer a concentration in the women's studies as well if you don't want a double major.
Yes, and the concentration you can do with the thesis. I think that's where I was getting my mind stuck. So if you do the specialized honors in psychology, which is the pathway that's laid out for students going on to graduate programs and includes a thesis and several other required courses. If you're going that pathway, you can do a concentration in women's studies, which is more than a minor, but a little less than a double major. But if you're not doing a thesis in psychology, you can do the double major that Jennifer's talking about, that allows you to combine gender and women's studies with psychology, which is a very interesting combination. And also sets you up with some interesting potential pathways for careers. Then there's also combined programs with philosophy. So you can do an honors Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Philosophy. So that's another double major. And that's interesting if you have an interest in the mind itself, just understanding how the mind works, how logic works and that sort of thing. Philosophy would be really helpful there. Am I missing any others?
No, that's everything I I would like to mention, though, that our degree also pairs nicely with many minors that are available in many other departments. One example is the new concentration in human nature. Many of our students add on minors, and there is enough room in our programs to allow students to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, when we were talking about neuroscience earlier, a biology minor would be great in a neuroscience-focused psychology major. That's another example.
And if what we're talking about sounds really complicated, so for those of you that are not kind of immersed into that post-secondary university environment right now, when you're saying honors, bachelor of this, majors, minors, concentration, specializations, double degrees, don't worry about it. We definitely have tons of supports in place. So Jennifer, who's connected with the program of psychology, is there to help and advise. We have advisors in our unit called Student Central as well. So we help you work out those questions you have, and we actually advise you to maximize your degree opportunity. So by adding these unique add-ons onto your degree. And I always talk about it like you're kind of going shopping. So you think about your post-secondary as a shopping experience, and I'm loading things into my shopping cart, and my degree is one of those things. But with that degree, I can add extra things that are not going to cost me any more money, but benefit me in the long run with my knowledge and my career opportunities. And that's when we talk about being able to do a double degree, or being able to add a major, so you're studying something in more detail, or a minor. And so it really allows you that customization of building a knowledge and building information and building your degree in an area that you're super interested in. So we've talked about, criminology and women's studies and gender studies and philosophy, and we have lots of options for you exploring that and add in that extra layer into your psychology degree as well. Awesome. So I think that's a great lead in now to talk a little bit about the student experience. So we're going to let our faculty have a breather, which is great, and take a moment. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A now with Jaden and talk a little bit about her experience here as a student. And I'm going to turn that over to Jess to lead that.
Awesome. Thanks, Tori. So I do have a couple questions for you, Jaden, if that's okay. To start things off, I'm just curious about what you think are the best things about Lakehead.
Well, I think the best things about Lakehead, I like the fact that the class sizes are small. Thunder Bay is a city, but it's not like Toronto or Vancouver. It's not a big city. So you get that city experience, but you also have that close to nature aspect as well, because we are basically in the bush. And because of how relatively small we are, like they said earlier, the class sizes are much smaller. So you do get a lot more, I don't want to say personal or intimate, but you get more personal or intimate experiences with your classmates, with your teachers. You kind of have a better chance of them remembering your face and your name, as opposed to somewhere where there's hundreds of students in a class. That would be one of the main selling points for me personally. I also like that for psychology specifically, there is a lot of opportunity, like we spoke of earlier, such in like the research part of things, which is so necessary for a field of working in psychology, be it experimental or clinical. So having all these supports and opportunities is great. And because of how few people there are here, you do get more time to ask questions and meet people and get to know your faculty better and things like that. So I'd say that's some of the best things about Lakehead there.
Yeah, those are a lot of the reasons I chose Lakehead too. I loved all the small class sizes.
Mm.
And I'll just note before I ask you something else, if anyone has anything that they'd like to learn about the student experience, or if you have any questions about what life is like in Thunder Bay, please pop them in the chat, because we're very excited to talk about our experiences and we'd love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
But, so what would you say were the most exciting aspects of psychology?
Um, Everything. That's such a cop-out answer, but it's true, especially if you're really interested in psychology like me. I'm like the mega nerd of psychology in my family, so learning about all of it has just been so exciting, and having those research opportunities just adds to it. And then you take classes that you want to learn about, like going back to the forensic psychology. That's coincidentally like one of my main interests, and I'm currently taking a forensic psychology course, and that's been so fun as well. So it really helps that to know that it's a very rich and interesting, exciting field to learn about and to take part in. So yes, that's my answer to that.
And I know that you've kind of already hinted to this, but can you just give an example of how your learning experience in psychology has helped you to prepare for life after university?
For sure. It's been so much more in depth than I originally thought, and I've been got to do so much more, so many things that I didn't think I'd get to do, because I took the chance to take these opportunities. And even though it was at first a little outside of my comfort zone, I just said yes. So then that just enhanced the experience. So these things, they're teaching you, it's the undergrad, so it's the basic of what you need to learn later on. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, so let me gather them. I know I'm talking a lot about the research opportunities, but they're just so fun. They give you that background because later on, whether you go into the clinical stream or the experimental stream, you need these foundational knowledge, right? And they let you practice that and ask questions when perhaps you may not get the chance to ask later on without getting looks or anything like that. Say when you're in a PhD, you can't ask basic questions. They kind of expect you to know, not to scare anyone, but this is such a great time to ask those questions and really build that knowledge and that skill set. And everyone has just been, like faculty and students have just been so ready to help. That's another thing that I like about Lakehead. Everyone's so supportive and ready to help. So it really does prepare you later on. I'm not quite sure how to express that anymore.
That's perfect. I appreciate that. And it doesn't look like there's any questions from our audience, but I'll hand it over to Tori and our faculty to see if you guys have any questions.
I don't think we do at this point. What we're going to do is we're going to go into kind of some of the admission requirements for coming into psychology. And I want to thank Jess. She was answering some questions behind the scenes about applying and the application process and admissions as well. So we want to just touch on that a little bit. And then if there are any other questions, please feel free to continue to post those questions in the Q&A or into the chat so we can get them answered before the end of the webinar today. So just for some information specifically about Lakehead, so our general admission requirements do require that you have a high school diploma. So if you are coming from Ontario, and we do realize that not everyone attending this webinar may be Ontario based, but if you're coming specifically from Ontario, we're looking for your OSSD or equivalent. So that's your high school diploma. We're looking for a minimum of 6 grade 12U university level or mixed level courses. And these have to include program prerequisites. And I'm going to get to the program prerequisites for the psychology program in the very next slide. And we're looking for an overall average or a minimum average of 70% or better in your top 6 or best 6 grade 12U or M level classes. Now, applying into our psychology program is a non-competitive entry. So non-competitive entry means as long as you meet those minimum requirements and have that overall average of 70% or better, in your top 6 grade 12 U or M level classes, you're guaranteed acceptance into the program. Now, the psychology program does have some specific admission prerequisites that we're looking for, and I've got them both on the screen right now. So we have talked about the psychology program from the arts, and coming from the arts, we're looking for that grade 12 U English, and then 5 additional grade 12 U or M level courses of your choosing for a total of 6. Now, if you are looking at applying into psychology from the science end of things, we are looking for that grade 12 U English, advanced functions, and then we're looking for 2 additional maths or sciences, and there's a whole list of those on the screen. Now, although coming into the psychology program from the arts, English is the only prerequisite required. If you are interested, we do recommend that you do also have a math and science coming into that program, but it's not a requirement. It just does prepare you for success in that program as well, but those are the admission requirements coming through. So I just also want to talk about a couple of different ways that you can continue to engage with us. So today has all been about psychology and our psychology program at Lakehead University out of our Thunder Bay campus. We are running a full webinar series this year. So typically we would be in person, traveling the province and hosting a ton of events, and everything has gone virtual this year. So our webinar series are running on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock and on Wednesday afternoons at 4. We have a whole bunch of them available, and you can check out our events page online to see if there's another webinar series you're interested in. We are also running a open house. Now, we had a fantastic open house last Saturday, and we have another open house coming up on Wednesday, December the 9th, and that is running from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. Registration is not open yet, but it will be open shortly in about a week or so. So you can check out our events page if you'd like to attend our next amazing virtual open house. And this is a great way to have some continued conversations with faculty, learn more about our scholarship programs, admission processes, learn about our amazing hometowns and student opportunities and student clubs, and kind of have all those questions answered. And so we did mention at the beginning of the webinar today that we are still all working from home. And I always love doing webinars and kind of engaging with students and seeing all the diverse backgrounds that we have in our home settings. And so we're not quite ready to invite you to campus for a campus tour at this time, but we are running a full virtual campus tour. And so from the comfort of your own home, you can tour both our Thunder Bay campus and our Aurelia campus. And if you are super excited about coming to campus once our campus tours are available again, you can fill in our form available on the website and allow us to contact you and welcome you to campus when our campus tours are fully up and running. Now, if you do have some questions after today and they didn't get answered, but I don't know how they couldn't. We've had such an amazing panel of experts on our webinar with us today. We do have the opportunity for you to do some follow-up with us. And so in our recruitment team, as part of our undergraduate recruitment team, we have the ability for you to book a personal meeting with us on a schedule that works best for you. So you can head to our event page. We have 8 different advisors right now at the undergraduate level. And you can just scroll down and either book a meeting directly with myself or with Jess, my co-host today, or one of our other advisors on campus. And we do encourage you to explore our campus through all of our social media channels as well, and really see that student voice and the experiences that are all part of this far from ordinary type of university experience. So I'm just going to check and see if we had any other questions that had not been answered. I want to thank everybody for your time today and for engaging. I know whenever I do one of these information sessions, I'm like, oh man, that is the program I should have taken at university. So every single time I almost get convinced that I should go back to school and do it again. So I always know you guys have done an amazing job at kind of providing that information and allowing the students to really understand what we can do with many of the programs. So I'd like to thank our co-hosts on the call with me today, on the webinar today, for your time, your knowledge, and your expertise. And an extra thank you to our student attendee for providing that student perspective on all that Lakehead has to offer. Lots of thumbs up. Thank you so much. So that is it for our webinar series today, all about psychology at Lakehead University. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us for about an hour and learning all that we have to offer. And we hope to see you in the future as you continue your journey and your adventure at Lakehead University. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of the day.